So I'm so glad to be with you all this morning, and to see your faces is so nice. And I know too that today we are speaking of joy on a day when this community is saying goodbye to a very important person, Charles. Today is a day to honor her life and to mourn her sudden death. And I think that brings a different tone to the service entirely. I spoke with Meredith a bit about Charlesie before the service. And Meredith said to me, she was a joy. She had a quiet, steady spirit. She was dependable. And I know that for me too, personally, Charlesie was a source of reliability and non-judgment. I loved singing with her, and also when I would come to be in the service, I would sometimes get to be part of the choir, which was so nice. And she also communicated with me as treasurer. And it just felt like one of her joys was doing things for this congregation. I experienced Charlesie as sort of a distance swimmer, like with strong measured laps. And she'd had enough experience to know that she knew how to get through the water with beauty. Not a lot of splashing around, but with grace and wit. So I'm very sorry for this great loss to this community. I'm glad that people get to be together today to honor her and lift her up, and lift each other up right now. So how can we talk about joy on a day with such sorrow in it? And in that, I think it's important to contemplate the difference between happiness and joy. Unlike happiness, I think joy knows how to coexist with sorrow. Joy can also coexist with exhaustion, with exertion, with work, even with struggle. As Mahatma Gandhi wrote, joy lies in the fight, in the attempt, in the suffering involved, not necessarily in the victory. So it's not exactly happiness. It's deeper than that. And I was thinking about it in a Buddhist sense, as I often do, about joy. And I think that joy can also be thought of as a well of energy. We've talked before from the Tibetan tradition, the Shambhala tradition, of the idea of wind horse. In Tibetan, that's lungta, unlimited energy of basic goodness and also wakefulness, what Buddhists might describe as Buddha nature. But there's evidence that this idea is much older than Tibetan Buddhism. This idea of energy, of horse energy, connectedness, strength, endurance, dignity. I don't know if anybody here has seen a horse gallop, just for the joy of it. Not because it has to, but because it can, because it fits within its environment, because it has legs and lungs and a mane to fly in the wind. So joy can be a galloping sometimes, a sense of belonging, connectedness, rightness, pleasure. And one piece I think of joy like that is rebellion, because there is always an end to this life, looming somewhere. There is death, and joy knows that. And yet today I will run with joy. Camus wrote, the only way to deal with an unfree world is to become so absolutely free that your very existence is an act of rebellion. And I think of that as living joyfully. And so today, I thought that we might do some participatory work in thinking about where we find our joy. Just writing in the chat, where are the places that you find something a little deeper than happiness, something more like energy, something like food in nature or connectedness to your surroundings. And I'm going to sing a song that makes me think both of Charlesy and of the act of finding joy. I'm going to sing you a little song. If you want to write in the chat things that are currently bringing you joy. And you'll have a chance later on to write in the chat things that you'd like to find more joy in, places you'd like to find joy that you might practice joy with. Right now, just other places, quiet places maybe, where you're finding joy. And I'll sing you this song. This is by Holly Meir. It goes, I am open and I am willing, for to be hopeless would seem so strange. It dishonors those who go before us, so lift me up in the light of change. I am open and I am willing, for to be hopeless would seem so strange. It dishonors those who go before us, so lift me up in the light of change. Thank you, Chili. And joy is walking in the woods by myself. Yeah. Taking off some of the constraints of busy everyday life. And Lynn talks about happiness being with friends and family, and joy is actually knowing deeply that they're healthy. So anybody else who would like to add anything about where joy can be found for you right now? And sometimes it's an excavation, right? Sometimes it's not immediately on the surface. Sometimes those are pets that meet us at the door. Sometimes those are looking at a room in our home in a different way. I'll give you some words of Mary Oliver. If you suddenly and unexpectedly feel joy, don't hesitate. Give into it. There are plenty of lives and whole towns destroyed or about to be. We are not wise and not very often kind, and much can never be redeemed. Still, life has some possibility left. Perhaps this is its way of fighting back. That sometimes something happens better than all the riches or power in the world. It could be anything. But very likely you notice it in the instant when love begins. Anyway, that's often the case. Anyway, whatever it is, don't be afraid of its plenty. Joy is not made to be a crumb. Perhaps this is life's way of fighting back. I like that idea. Helping someone on their journey to wellness, Jenica says. Yeah, the act of connecting, knowing that it's a hard road and connecting, and seeing that it's doing some good. Susan says, I feel joy when I look at a blue sky, flowers and green trees. Yeah, just what's beauty. What's beautiful out there. And taking a moment with it, right? It's not just beauty that we ignore, but it's beauty that we attend to. Talia and Judy say joy is being with my family. Yeah. I think we had a chance this year to recognize that that's not to be taken for granted, right? That's not just how things are always going to be, always, no matter what. Sometimes we're actually given an opportunity to recognize gratitude, an opportunity to practice gratitude for something like being with family. So there are also some hidden sources of joy, ways that we can find joy, I think, because they're not necessarily easy like a t-shirt that just says like, choose joy. I'm like, oh, I'll go be happy. I'll run in some flowers or something, you know. The Thich Nhat Hanh talks about this as a practice, generating joy. And one way we can do that is through practicing a mindful moment. If joy is not immediately accessible to us, that's okay. But I mean, it's not really okay because our heart misses it. But it doesn't have to be something that immediately happens to us. If we practice a mindful moment, it can give us the space to recognize what's false and what is real. And that can actually give us an upwelling of joy. So Beth Pitkins, who's the author of this book called Your Art Will Save Your Life, she wrote, I've learned that I'm not responsible for my first thought, but I'm responsible for my second thought and for my first action. And I really like that. Because we can feel all kinds of ways. And we can have all kinds of immediate impressions that don't tell us the truth. And sometimes mindfulness, taking moments to breathe and notice our breath, and give us the time to notice what's true. I'll give you an example of that. I had a moment of really letting go of joy this week, or letting go into joy this week, which was that I had been running around this week kind of a lot, and I've been carrying something on my heart about a friend, somebody who I care about and respect deeply, but I also have some self-conscious feelings about. I always think, oh, she's really good at what she does. She's so efficient, and here I am with my ADHD, and how could she really respect me all that much? These are some of the underneath feelings. And based on a comment, I think a comment that she made many years ago, I still carry that around sometimes. My mind has kept that as real, even though we've talked about it since then. A couple of days into this heavy feeling of feeling like, my heart is thinking of her, and my heart is feeling like I'm not a good friend to her, or not a friend that she needs, I realized that this came from a dream. I realized that I had had a dream at the beginning of the week that had been something where she and her husband had said mean words to me. It wasn't real. That never happened. It was just sort of living in my subconscious as this place that, oh, this is truth. This is what true is. Imagine that moment of freedom and joy. And I'm just like, oh, I made that up. That's not a real thing at all. And I think that, at least for myself, this happens. This does not happen infrequently. So there can be a lightness and joy in that. Two, in Buddhist tradition, another kind of practicing of joy is sympathetic joy, mudita, it's called in Sanskrit. So sympathetic joy is joy for others. And again, sometimes you may feel so low that it's actually not automatic for us to feel other people's joy. But in general, as interconnected beings, that is one of the benefits of being interconnected humans together. And I think that if we can't feel others' joy, we know that we need to attend to our needs. We need to really focus in and say, what am I needing? Because that basic connection to others, that feeling that I can naturally be joyful for someone else's joy, is sort of feeling rusty, or that connection isn't right. But to allow another person's joy to plant a seed of joy within us, that's part of why we have our practice and services of joys and sorrows, right? And if you want some extra special joy in your life, I invite you to go into your browser and look for the hashtag Black Boy Joy, which just has so many lovely moments of little boys just having these joyful moments for different things and different reasons all over the internet, all over the world. And I think we can't always only use mudita or sympathetic joy as our one source of joy. Right? We can't just rely on being glad for others. It's a meaningful place. Helps us remember that the world is bigger than us, you know? And I think especially when we're doing really hard work for others and with others, to see that joy that's there is incredible. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Meredith. Okay. So, yeah. Just say that Henry Nouwen writes that joy does not simply happen. We have to choose joy and keep choosing it every day. And like with kids, there can be overwhelm, there can be sadness, there can be fear, but joy is a practice. We return to again and again to water the roots of it. Oscar Wilde wrote, "A flower blooms for its own joy." And joy can be like that, a flower. And I like to think about that because we can water each other's joy, water each other's flower. And so now in the chat, as we're preparing to close, would you like to write in a place where you would like to practice joy? A place where a mindful attention, or you feel like that could be, maybe it's one of your regular routines, something where you feel like you could practice joy in a different way. Is there a place you want to water? And I'll sing to a few words of the song. I am open and I am willing to be yours. You seem so strange. It is all musical before us. So lift me up in the light of joy. Lift me up in the light of joy. Lift me up in the light of joy.